Well, welcome to the Life Safety Podcast. Today we got a special guest from STI, Firestop. I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Well, my name is Kelly Mason. I am the Director of Healthcare Partnerships for Specified Technologies out of Somerville, New Jersey, National Director.
All right. So it's been a while, man.
It has. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I think last time we saw each other, I was at Baylor.
Yep.
Yeah, you came over there with Eric.
Yep.
And
definitely.
Yeah. So what's been going on in the STI world?
You know, it's blowing and going. It's trying to get the message out. You know how it is. It's always a fight.
All right.
And trying to find new ways to do that, kind of like what we're doing today, actually. But, you know, putting out webinars and creating healthcare life safety symposiums in major cities, things like that.
Right. Okay. Because I don't know. I know we go back, to Texas Children's, maybe about 7-8 years ago.
Yep.
I met you and you did some fire barrier management classes for us, and we got Fit One certified. And how did you get into fire barrier management? Like, how long have you been with STI?
I started with STI back in 1998, and prior to that, I was a distributor of their product line. And back then, it was kind of new to the industry. There were products out there, but very few, and there wasn't a lot of UL testing and things like that. So I've watched it grow for sure. And when I came to work for STI, I started as a territory person covering a small turf, calling on everything, anything from a school to a hotel to a healthcare facility. And we had a lot of mind share in healthcare. It started to really take off, and I started to kind of pay more attention to that. And my owners came to me and said, could we mimic that around the country? I would like to continue this healthcare discussion. So they put me in this position, and it was kind of a grassroots effort. And now I have got a whole team behind me, and we're doing real well with it.
Nice. Okay. So 1998.
Yep.
Wow. So I'm sure there's been a drastic difference in regulation since then.
There has been, it's always been constant that, life safety is obviously extremely important, and no more that in healthcare than anywhere else. I mean, with all the regulation associated with that. So it's a great breeding ground for new products and ways to try to eliminate mistakes and things like that. And so that's kind of where that's the path we're taking. We're trying to get away from conventional method as much as we can and try to get it to products and solutions that can be easily done, future proofing of buildings and things like that. So it's you've been in that arena, it's a daunting task with all the people coming in and out and getting into your barriers and doing those kind of things. So trying to make that a little easier.
Right. What do you think could be done to, obviously there's no set regulation from the Life Safety Code perspective as far as a requirement for an annual inspection or some kind of frequency. It's pretty vague where it must maintain barriers. I think there's some language in the IBC side that does specify a time frame, but being that, all these accreditation, being that healthcare has the most barriers, by way of nature of having, patients incapable of self-preservation, which then in return has more fire barriers and smoke barriers. What are you seeing for that as far as, you think that's something in the future in the works, or is there any kind of committee working on that? Is the FCAI? Because I feel personally that there needs to be a fixed time frame for doing these inspections other than just saying you need to maintain your barriers. Because prior to, I related to fire doors back in 2016 when they adopted the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code. It explicitly said thou shalt check fire doors annually. And there was a set of criteria. And then all of a sudden there was this boom in the fire door market and then there was a lot of deficiencies that were discovered because prior to that, people were just maintaining. So I asked that in the same context of fire barriers. Right now they're told to have a program, manage it, but there's no set requirement for documentation that you need to do it on a fixed interval. I mean, even dampers get checked and inspected every 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all part of the passive fire protection. But what about barriers? Do you think that's something that needs to be? I mean, I think it does. Do you see it going that way? Is there talks about that?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about that. And really, what ends up happening, there's been a few changes in the CMS requirement, see it, cite it, they call it.
Right.
So if something is cited in the field by an inspector, you've got 60 days to do that repair.
And what you mean by that is if they see 10 different penetrations, those are 10 different separate sightings, where before they used to lump those in as there's penetrations throughout. It
Right.
would be one sighting, and
Right.
now if they see 20, those are 20 specifically different sightings.
The really the only thing that kind of governs or forces a facility to heavily maintain their barrier is they know that one of the governing bodies, whether it's Joint Commission or DMV or one of those, are going to come in, typically in a 3-year window,
Right.
and they you know how it goes. So
Oh, yeah.
you know what the window's going to look like. They're going to be here in the next 6 months, so you ramp up your maintaining of barriers and get someone out there and make sure that these things are tightened up, because now your feet, is on the fire. So, but no, there is no standard at this point other than that, which is, for the longest time, that was probably one of the better standards out there in terms of, as a facility, manager, we know the Joint Commission's coming, get all of our life safety issues in order, right? But no, there's nothing right now that it would be like a fire door application or something like that. I do see a lot of new companies that are arising that are from that fire door or damper inspection community that are saying, look, I'm in your barrier. I see issues. Why don't you let me do something about that? But there's no requirement for, marking your penetrations or anything like that. Documentation, it could be on a napkin. But,
Right.
Really, but we as a manufacturer, I can tell you, we've tried to take it to the next level. When I talked about how do you make things a little easier on the facility, we created an app, firestop locator.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the firestop locator is a real simplistic way to load your life safety drawings. And then as you migrate through the building, whether you're a maintenance personnel or you've handed it to a contractor, you can document what you did, take evidence of that via a photograph or something like that, then hand it off to the facility director, and the facility director could then switch that system to inspection and kind of go about it that way. Again, it's an added process that's not required.
Right.
So, sometimes time is hard to come up with. There are a few facilities that are taking advantage of those kinds of things, but I think it's getting better, but, we're still in the top 10 for infractions that are found during inspection, is penetrations through fire-rated barriers. It's a never-ending process.
And I'm sure I've seen, at least in my experience, over at least the last 5 years and maybe even over the last 10, there's been a heightened awareness. There's been a lot of education. I know you've done a lot of symposiums as well as other folks to try to bring that education and awareness. So I can see that, kind of growing in the awareness and education, but it still seems to be a prevalent issue. And that, I guess that's where, if I was to come up with a solution, obviously there's no answer, one all be all, but it would be to have a fit, because when they ask for documentation on fire doors, you got to produce it.
Right.
Fire alarm, they produce it. It's on the checklist. But the barriers is just, and then oftentimes, the surveyor will walk and, the facility will get lucky and won't find those penetrations, but sometimes we know that they exist. And I think there's not even an NFPA for fire stop. You go to fire doors, it's NFPA 80.
Right.
Fire alarm is 72. Electrical testing 110 and so forth. So
we have one little paragraph,
in the life safety code, right?
Right. That talks about, a third party tested process, be utilized to bring integrity of these firewalls back. And that's about it. And it reads basically the same in all codes.
Yeah, it's pretty vague.
And it really doesn't get into much detail past that.
Right. It doesn't show who needs to be qualified and what, if they need to be trained. And so I think that needs to be, something that's forthcoming. But so this webinar you got coming up, I noticed you have a webinar. What date is it, and what can we expect from that webinar? What's the agenda?
It's going to be on February 12th at 1 o'clock Central Time. And this particular webinar, we've done a series of these. We started doing these a couple of years ago, but this one is going to be more about really diving back to the basics. The UL system must meet the application.
I love that.
And
I love that.
From where you come from, you realize that a lot of people think that the red caulk in the tube is really all you need, and that will take care of your application. But the products aren't rated. They're just a component of systems.
Right.
And so we're going to dive into great detail about specific systems. So we're going to take, standard pipe. We're going to take insulated pipe. We're going to take head of wall joint. We're going to take cables. We're going to dive into the systems and talk about these specifics and how you change anything within that range. Then you got to go get another UL assembly. And we're trying to get the inspection community up to speed on this as well, so they can ask for that rather than saying, let's go take a look at your barrier and see if it's rated,
Right.
and see if I see any holes. They can say, what UL assembly is that's there?
No, I think that's spot on, because I've often, when I've consulted and asked, are the contractors trained up? And I say, well, a telltale sign to let them know if they're competent, to let you know, if you ask them, hey, what UL system did you apply to this penetration? If they give you that look, that deer in the headlights look, then you know that they don't know actually, that
Right.
you can't ensure that they're installing it compliantly. And so I'm glad you're doing that, because I think that's, if anything, a fire stopping, it's the UL system, the correct application,
Yep.
and applying that to the right application.
Yep.
And then where in that kind of spectrum do engineering judgments come in?
Well, engineering judgments are important. You can't test for everything. We try.
Right.
We have the latest built furnace in North America, so we can do some pretty great things with that furnace. So what we do at STI is, if we start to see a pattern of engineering judgments, like for instance, when we started to see a pattern of people calling in and saying, we've got to do something about a sleeve that has overloaded cable.
Right.
And as you know,
I remember
we've had
that.
this conversation.
Right, definitely.
The largest system available to anyone out there using conventional methods, which would be a sealant or putty in a sleeve, is 49%. And that's our system. If you're using one of the other competitors' products, you're going to be in that range. But the point being is no one has anything that goes above that. But you and I both know that if the person running the cable doesn't have an understanding of that, they will fill that sleeve right up
To the max.
So there's nothing you can do really with conventional applications to fix that. It's going to
not
be
feasible.
non-compliant.
Yeah, you can't. It's unfeasible to try to remove all that
That's
wire
right.
and unplug it.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's just not going to happen.
So we started to see a pattern there, and we started to think, we've got to figure a way to come up with something that's not a giant overbuild, that goes 6 feet beyond the penetration.
Right.
And that's what they were. And we came out with a product like this, which is just something that attaches right to the sleeve. And now you can take that sleeve from 50% to 100% full just with one screw.
Right.
So things like that. When I talked about, we're trying to take some of the guesswork out and requirements for people to pull stuff out and put stuff in, all of that. So that's how we deal with engineering judgments. No matter what, you're still going to have, and it's very important. And it's very important by my ownership that we turn those engineering judgments within 24 hours too. Time is of the essence on
Right.
that. You've got contractors waiting to do something. We base engineering judgments off of other like systems, maybe something a little
Pretty
different.
comparable. Right.
Comparable, right? And it's a way of doing business. You have to do that. But again, if we start to see a pattern, we don't like putting engineering judgments out there either,
Right.
Because they're just that. They're a judgment.
Right.
So we would rather have something that we've put in the furnace, burn it, and make sure it will operate like we think it will. So
Who's authorized to do an engineering judgment? And I mean, is it based off the manufacturer of that product?
yeah, so at STI anyway, I myself in the field cannot write an engineering judgment. Everything goes through one of our fire protection engineers.
Gotcha.
So, and rightfully so. I mean, you can look at things. I've been in the business a long time, and I can look at it and go, I know what we could do there to make that work.
You can make an unofficial judgment.
Right.
Right.
But I don't do that because, we're talking about life safety here. And so we have a large array of fire protection engineers that write those judgments. They all get together. They brainstorm together, and they roundtable things.
Right.
So just to make sure that we're safe when we put it out there.
No, definitely. And going back to the issue of the cable overfill, I still see that when I'm out consulting. It's more of who's enforcing that too, right?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of one of those deals where you don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but if you spot it and tell, maybe a facility manager, he or she may not be, likely to want to repair it because it's been like that forever. And well, I've never got cited by Joint Commission,
Correct.
so why do I got to fix it now? So it's one of those deals where it's kind of hard to enforce or to remedy because they don't have the education on it.
Well, we're trying to do that too. I have a presentation coming up with a group of inspectors in a couple of weeks, and obviously that's going to be a big topic of conversation. I mean, we're not the only manufacturers that deal with that problem.
Yeah. Right.
It's a very common issue in the industry. So making the inspector understand what to look for and understand that, and it's important. So That's, it's a grassroots effort sometimes, I think. It's just, one at a time. But we're trying really, really hard to get it out, get the information out there, to large bodies of people that are in the industry so that we can eliminate that issue.
Right. Other than, what are some of the top issues you're finding out there still or hearing about as when it comes to penetration, specific issues?
Well, there's a couple of different things. Obviously, aside from the overloaded cable issue, cables in general, as you know, managing a big facility they're a daunting task. They're an ever-moving situation, and it may start out when you're using something that's a conventional sleeve and putty, and you've only got a couple of cables, but within a couple of years, you're overfilled and that kind of thing. So there's things that we've tried to design in terms of a sleeve that has the firestop in it, doesn't require any manipulation or maintenance to it. It can start from completely empty and go to 100%. This product here is called Easy Path. It goes along the same lines of the retrofit, but when that sleeve is in the wall, then there's no requirement for any movement, altering, placing a putty, sealant, nothing. It's over. So if you feel like you've got an area that's going to require a lot of moves, adds, and changes, then that would be the smart move. Don't want to use them everywhere. Yeah, high traffic.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing it also is a big influx in head-of-wall joint too.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of
older buildings have, maybe drywall mud or mortar or fiberglass insulation stuffed in their flutes, and that doesn't meet the requirements. So we've tried to design some things that will actually, and I'm going to talk about that in my webinar, something that would actually encapsulate that, so you don't have to dig all that out. So there's a lot of different
just
designs.
Plug and play, just cover it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things that are coming out. With that head of wall joint in particular, in new construction, there's a requirement of stuffing of mineral wool within the fluted deck, placing of mineral wool at the bottom of the flute, which really where the movement is.
Right.
It's a lot of labor, and we've developed some gasketing materials that would actually go right on the top track and shoot right to the floor. And now you've eliminated a large part of labor, take a lot of cost out of the build. So things like that, there's a lot of those older buildings out there, and when an inspector sees it and he cites it, it's critical mass at that point.
Right.
And so we want to make sure we could develop something in some applications that would be able to be an easy fix for somebody that gets caught like that. So
definitely, that's a game changer.
Yep.
What about my favorite topic when it comes to fire stopping is scab patches?
Oh yeah,
hot patches, double patches, whatever we call them. But we did Alex and I, my colleague, we did a recent inspection, and we had an argument with the vendor where he said no, it is approved, and he said show me in the code where it's not approved. And I was able to show him, Chapter 8 of the Life Safety Code where it says it has to be tested per ASTM and the UL methods, and that was kind of my rebuttal on it. But I just think it's still a prevalent issue. I mean, you see them even still in new construction. Is there a clause for existing? Is there a grandfather, so to speak, clause for existing scat patches that have been in existing for buildings for, let's say, 20 years?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
A scab patch is a scab patch. In a fire, we don't think we haven't tried to burn these and try them. A scab patch typically looks like a piece of drywall covering over in a hole in the wall, and 4 or 5 screws in place. And if we're really lucky, they've taken some intumescent sealant and tried to butter around the edges.
Right.
The problem is that within 15 minutes that falls down.
Right.
So you've got a large opening there. I've had people challenge me on that as well, and I keep the letter from the National Gypboard Association that talks about the proper patching of a UL 400 series wall assembly, and it doesn't look anything like what a scab patch looks like.
Right.
So, systems for scab patching or for patching large openings like that are, there's very few, and there's a requirement behind them. Framing of the opening, for instance.
Right.
Screws 6 inches on center, 3-inch overlap. There's a lot more to it than just throwing a piece of board up there.
Or some pillows.
Right. Or there's a lot to them. So we call them super systems, and we've got a lot of super systems out there that we like to push out to facilities in particular, because a lot of times you get above a fire door, you start to see this mess of things going on there. So we've tested multiple things going through one opening. Don't get me wrong; they're not easy.
Right.
There's going to be some
a lot of complex.
You're going to have to be a mechanic to be able to work it. But again, we're talking about in healthcare, defend in place. We can't get patients out, so you got to take care of those applications. So we try to come up with systems that, again, we're trying to make it easy for the guy to be able to repair something that over time has become a big issue.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I just see Scat Patches continue to be
Oh my
a
gosh.
major
I got
issue.
some great pictures. I wish we could show pictures
Yeah.
today. I've got some great pictures of basically a whole wall of scab patch, and it's like, how's that wall even standing there?
Exactly. And other than Scat Patches and overfilled conduits, what else are you still seeing out there?
Well, you know, the basic things that we always see, you know, where maybe, you know, around an insulated pipe, around a standard pipe, things like that, you know, somebody will do 3/4 of the joint because it's just too much trouble to get up on top and finish that on top. And who's
Right.
going to look up there? Who's going to get on a ladder and actually get above that
Right.
pipe and see that I didn't do the top quarter?
Right.
Things like that. You know, we see a lot of stuff like that all the time. And we get, you know, maybe where a product had been put into place and over time from movement and that kind of thing, you got to pay attention to those things. We see a lot of times where a system will call for some sort of a backer, like a mineral wool to go behind it.
Right.
Rather than do that, you know, maybe there's foam in the can. You know, got lots of pictures of those too, and put just enough red on the outside to cover it.
Just to mask it.
Yeah, just to, you know, to mask it from the
Yeah.
guy that doesn't really know what he's looking at, you know, those kind of things. You know, in the world of
That's where destructive testing or inspection comes in.
absolutely. And, you know, and when I'm talking to healthcare, just like when I was talking to you, and I know you were all over it, but, you know, hey, take the time when someone comes through the building and is running some sort of service, don't write that check to that, you know, to that service until you've gone out and done that inspection.
Right.
So a lot of our trainings that we do are how to properly inspect, not necessarily install, but how do you inspect
How you
a
identify
firestop
it.
application?
Right.
You know, first of all, you need to have that UL system in your hand. If you just go out there and the guy says, okay, I'm done, I've placed fire caulk around the penetration, you go out there and go, okay, I don't see any voids, that doesn't make it right. So you need to make sure that you have a UL system to back that. And I have heard in a couple of instances where a inspector from CMS or Joint Commission or others will come in and say, can you provide me with the UL system base that you're using? It's rare, but it does happen. And, you know, that sometimes people are like, uh-oh, you know, a lot of hospitals will collect a permit of a contractor coming in and they feel pretty good about themselves. And don't get me wrong, that is step number one.
Right.
If I'm going to come in and I've secured a contract within your hospital to run a service, say cable or whatever, and I come in, I should have to fill in, yes, I am, you know, who I am, the company I work for, the days I'm going to be there, and where I'm working in the building.
Right.
And they'll slide that across the table and be very proud of that and go, look what we're doing. And I go, that's awesome. Where is the closeout in this permit? Well, what do you mean? We sent somebody out and looked at it. I don't see any UL system numbers written in this permit. I would require that.
Right.
It's a submittal. If a contractor's working on a project down the street, doesn't have to be healthcare, it can be anything. When he's bidding for that project, he has to turn in a submittal packet of what he's going to apply, and it has to have an architectural stamp on it.
Right.
Why don't they do that in healthcare?
I don't know. So you're saying you would if you were in charge of that specific area or in the healthcare side, it would be a required field to put the UL system.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of
Absolutely.
sense.
Because listen, the first thing that the inspector is going to say when they walk in the doors, show me your managerial approach towards life safety. I would like to be able to slide that over or open up an app and say, here's all the UL systems and this is where they're located in the building.
Nice.
And that person could take that with them on their inspection run. And I'll tell you, that's the kind of thing that needs to happen. And there are facilities that do it.
Right.
You know, you were marching down that road.
Right.
You ran quite a tight ship.
Yeah, I always try my best.
There's a lot of them that just are just trying to get by. And I understand sometimes it can be a cost issue and that kind of thing, but
Right.
some of these things really are free.
Oh, yeah.
We're just putting it on the contractor that won the contract. And we're not asking him to do anything else that he wouldn't do on any other project.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what kind of barrier management systems? I know you guys have a comprehensive one that you guys train and teach on.
Yep.
Obviously, having the UL system integrated into that.
Yep.
Are you seeing pictures integrated to that as well, before and afters?
Absolutely.
Or that's what you're seeing as well.
That's what we always that's what we ask for. Our barrier management program has been in place for 17 years now.
Oh wow.
Actually, Mayo Clinic was the first one to adopt it, and we have trained so many people within that city where they're located, because everyone that walks in that building that's going to get above a ceiling has to have some sort of a certification and full understanding of what they're doing there. But the barrier management program for many, many years really has remained the same. The standard operating practice is really the piece of that program that is so important, because when I ask hospitals, how are you dictating to people that are coming in the building what you expect of them? And they're like, well, we really don't. And it's like, why don't you have a standard? You probably have a standard for many other things in the building. Why don't you have one for life safety applications?
Right.
So the standard's written. It's not product specific. It just tells the person that's going to. I think it should be part of the bid document. If you're going to work in my facility, you got to sign here. Yes, I read it and I fully understand it. Right. So that if I come back on you and go, I found some of your penetrations that weren't done correctly. Well, I don't know. I thought it was the other guy's job. No, you signed the contract right here.
And furthermore, I don't know if it's part of that program, but the contractor who's responsible for, penetrating these barriers should display some kind of competency that they are qualified, whether it's a specific manufacturer training, a certification, or just something in general that shows, hey, look, I'm qualified. I know what I'm doing. I don't just know that UL system, but I know the physics and what's behind fire barrier management.
It just seems like, what's the big deal? It's a tube of caulk, right? I mean, there's so much more involved in it. And so we're trying to let people know that, listen, and we help with that, so we become a partner with the facility. So we'll come in, you make sure that standard operating practice is becoming a part of your everyday function. Right. We'll come in and train those people of what's in that standard operating practice, and we want them to start turning in UL assemblies with every job that they do.
Nice.
That is staple. If you're using the old, analog paper trail version, it's stapled right to that penetration permit. And if an inspector comes in and says, "Show me what you're doing," you can flip them over and start looking at it. If you would like to go inspect that area, take that page with you and go out there and look at those UL systems. On the new app, you could actually open up the app in your iPad or your phone and scroll through and say, okay, I'm on floor 1. Here's door number 2. Fly through there and find what's there. Look at it and go, okay, I like what I see.
Yeah, I checked it out. One of the things I like is it's specific. It gives you the specific point on the drawing where it's at. So
it's real simplistic to to use as well. So why more people don't use that, I don't know.
Right.
It could just be that they feel like maybe it's just a time crunch, but boy, I'll tell you, if there's a fire in your building or smoke gets through that building, it's going to be a really bad situation. So
definitely,
it's better to be safe than sorry, for sure.
Definitely. And Fit One, you're still doing that training.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Alex and I, my colleague and I, had that training earlier last year or late last year, and then we were luckily privileged to go to the Fit Two training out in Jersey. And funny story, we were out there and we were fortunate enough to grab tickets to the Yankees versus Astros game. I know the Astros are getting a lot of flack right now. And we were able to, it was pretty brutal. We went to, was it game 4?
Were you wearing your colors?
We were wearing our colors, and we scathed out of there alive. But we won that game. And funny enough, it was the game that got rained out.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, what are the chances that we're on business?
So you had to stay another day?
We had to stay another day. It was like, we're not going back. We're rescheduling our flight, and we were able to do that. And we ended up going that night. And it was a great game. It was, some cool people as well. And we met one of a director from Presbyterian Queens. And I just got a call from him the other day, and he was roasting me about the Astros and just letting me have it. And hey, what happened? He started thumping on the trash can and, doing all this stuff. And he also even said, I'll take a picture. I'll send you a video when, what's his name? The pitcher? Garrett Cole, yeah. He was, I'll send you some video when he's pitching. Of course, he was with us. So he let me have it, and all I could do was take it. It's like, hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I know.
But they're very prideful up there as well as we are of our Astros.
Oh, I have a running bet with my staff in that part of the country every year. So I'm wondering if I should give him his money back. I don't know, but
yeah, no, but we got to see the burn test, which I know you and I talked about. I was supposed to go out there when I was with Children's and never made it out there, but I really enjoyed that part. Out of all of it was the burn test.
It's something to see. I mean, it really opened your eyes. Right. There's so many things that have to happen for us to be able to bring a product to the field.
Right.
And there's a lot of failures. We're always trying to make it quicker, faster, all the time, and trying to cut cost of it anywhere we can. But you get a lot of failures from that too. And our actual assembly, our furnace, we're directly wired right to UL. So
nice.
It's almost as if they're sitting right there in the room with you. So when you apply to run a tested assembly, then there's someone sitting at the computer watching it live as it's happening. It's a pretty cool process.
Nice. And so y'all guys have Fit 2 trainings rolling out this year as well?
Yeah, we do. We do 5 every year. They fill up very quickly. We got one coming up next month. that's a 2-day, as you said, you
Right.
get to see an actual burn, an actual test as we're doing it. It really opens your eyes to that. But, those are our fire protection engineers that are giving that class. And, you get a real, sense of what it takes,
Right.
to actually bring a product to market.
No, definitely. No, I really enjoyed it. I was glad I was able to go to it. What are some new products that are coming out for STI, or just new things firestop related that you see on the horizon? Anything in general?
Well, we've gotten into even non-rated assemblies too.
Okay.
Because as you stated earlier, sometimes the walls, the distance between firewalls are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's all based on how fast can I make it to that doorway,
Right.
or that doorway, and I don't know I don't know the scientific behind all that, but so there's a lot of smoke walls in the building and those kinds of things. So you're sealing those walls as well. You're just sealing them for a different reason, and they may not be fire rated, but there may be another reason behind that. Acoustics could be a play, because you don't want to hear the bad news that someone's getting in the room next to you, that kind of thing. So we've developed some products that are of the non-rated sort, but you're still sealing a barrier. And so we've gone down that road, and we're trying to develop some new things there. We've got a really good product. This one here is along that Easy Path line, but this is a non-rated version of that, so that you're able to run cable easily through a non-rated barrier, and you're remaining sealed just as if it was a fire-rated assembly.
Yeah, one of the top deficiencies that I see out when I'm doing consultations is in IDF rooms. This is a non-barrier, non-rated ceiling, like a typical ceiling tile ceiling, and it'll have a big gaping holes with the cable going up.
You love that too if you're a facility director.
And they get cited for that all the time, and so that's a good solution there to kind of. Is there one that you can kind of like couple around the cable?
Yeah, so these actually do, and this is the newest version of it. It just came out, so this is our larger version. We make a smaller version of this too, but
so you got a retrofit.
Yeah, and it does come apart and split in two. And then
Okay.
we decided, just what you're talking about through the ceiling grid, we make it in white now, which would match the ceiling tile, just aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
But it also has a bracket that will actually attach to a unistrut against the wall, so that it's
Properly supported.
mechanically fastened.
Yeah.
And you can run your cable up and down through it, and it's a really cool product. But it's got a smoke rating and a great acoustical rating too. So that's some of the world. We make a sealant now called Smoke and Sound that we use for sealing up around penetrations through non-rated walls and that kind of thing. Another thing that we're getting, we've always been the leader in curtain wall applications, so we're talking more new construction at this point. But when a building's coming out of the ground and they're putting those exterior walls on, those are non-rated barriers, but the code says that the floor rating needs to go out to the exterior of the building. And depending on what that exterior is made of, is it aluminum, or is it steel stud?
Is there a curtain wall?
It's
involved?
curtain wall application, right? And what's the curtain wall? What's the spandrel panel made of? Is it glass? Is it brick? What is it? It takes you in a whole different world. It's not really a new concept anymore, but there's sandwich panels and things like that are pre-made in a factory somewhere that have a metal back pan on them, and in a fire, that metal starts to creak and move, and there's a lot of things going on there. So there's a lot of processes that have to be built into that, to properly fire stop that. So we have an actual specialist. His name is Eric LaCroix. He's going to be doing a webinar for us too.
Nice.
And Eric has all the knowledge. I mean, everybody calls him when it comes to a curtain wall design. He does a really, really good job and understands that world. So he's always looking for ways to try to eliminate labor and things like that associated with that too. So that's another piece of business that we think that we have become the leader in, kind of like with cabling and other things. But
nice. I do got a question to take your perspective on. So we talked about smoke barriers. So in my opinion, a smoke barrier is basically a fire barrier, at least the way it's constructed. What is your take on how to properly fire stop a smoke barrier? Not a combination fire smoke barrier, but a smoke barrier, which in theory is actually a fire barrier.
It's got to be a 1 hour rated assembly.
Right.
So it's got to be something that's been tested just like a fire barrier.
So you would hold it to the same standard
Sure.
as a fire barrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on its constructibility.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So you're using basically the same systems. And in the webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about, the difference between systems and the F rating, the fire rating that's associated with that particular system. I have, been on projects, and I'll say, they'll be very proud of the fact that they do have a submittal system. And I'll say, why don't you let me see that system and let's do a walkthrough?
Right.
And we go around and look, and we've got 1 hour systems for 2 hour applications. And it's like, that doesn't work like that,
Right.
So hopefully we can enlighten some people with the webinar that we're going to be doing as to things to look for.
And when is that webinar?
It'll be next Wednesday.
Okay. What date is that? Is that the 12th?
12th.
Yeah, okay.
February 12th.
February 12th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's going to be at 1 o'clock Central Time. You can go on LinkedIn. You can go to my LinkedIn page. You can go to STI's, STIfirestop.com.
Register on there.
Yep. You could register for that.
Okay.
It's a free webinar. So sign up for that, sit in, and actually we're going to, anyone that signs up, we're going to provide a link that's going to have an actual submittal packet. So you can download your own submittal packet. So you can go through them systems with me, have it right in front of your face, and you can go through it with me as we go through them. Nice.
No, I think that's a big deal, UL systems. Yeah, man. All right. Well, anything else you want to add? Anything else going on?
I mean,
what's your role right now? Where are you? I mean, I know you're national the director, right?
Yep.
For the products, but I know you're based out of Tomball.
Yep, I live in a suburb of Houston here in Tomball, Texas. Our home office is in Somerville, New Jersey, where our products are. That's where all the smart guys live. Come up with all these great product lines. But I cover nationally the healthcare sector, and I've got personnel that work in my arena with me with healthcare. But we've got IT specialists, we have curtain wall specialists we talked about, we've got interior finish specialists that we talked about. So I think we do things differently than a lot of others out there. We want to make sure that we fully understand the environment we're working in. So rather than just being, an answer to everyone and, a little bit about everything, we've decided that, we need to divide that out, have a person that's a go-to person,
right,
and then build a team around that. So that's kind of how we're doing it, and it
Nice.
seems to be working pretty good for us.
And I know you've done lots of presentations. Heck, you and I did a co-presented couple years back.
IFMA, yeah, IFMA.
Yeah, it was IFMA. You did one recently. I know was it in Corpus Christi?
Mm-hmm.
You were on that one, right?
That one I didn't make.
Okay.
But that was one of our symposiums that I talked about.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't make it for that one, but those healthcare symposiums, again, we sponsor that. We bring in speakers. Basically what's ever topical in the healthcare industry. So it's not a full day of me talking about firestop.
Right.
I've got 1 hour to talk about barrier management. We have Doug Erickson typically with Facility Guidelines Institute.
I think he was the one on it, yeah.
Yeah, he comes in and he speaks on things that are going on in the design of the healthcare facility.
And he's part of the STI team, correct?
Well, he's a consultant for us. He's
Okay.
a senior analyst for us, and I've been very fortunate to be able to work with him because he's been in the healthcare industry for a long, long time. He's run facilities, helped design facilities, he's inspected facilities, he's done it all. So he's a real good mentor for sure. And we have other speakers, depending on maybe it's infection control or other types of things that come in and speak in these things too. And it's typically 4 or 5 speakers, an Ask the Expert session, and then it's a one-day deal, So the next one we got one coming up in Oklahoma City at OU.
Okay.
We're looking to do one here in Houston too.
Oh, nice.
Hopefully in the near future. We've got one coming up in the Carolinas, New York City.
There's always a good turnout on those, right?
They are. We fill the room. So we try to get the biggest venue we can, and it doesn't matter what we get. We seem to jam the room full of people. Listen, when you bring a group of people that are experts in their field and they're talking about something in the healthcare sector, people are going to come,
right,
to listen. So those have been real successful for us, and you've helped me with some of that, and I may call on you again. You don't know. So
here we go.
Yeah, your knowledge is well respected. So
I appreciate
when
it.
we do the one in Houston, maybe we'll talk about that.
There we go. All right, let me know. So anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
Well, I think that's. I really do appreciate you letting me sit in with you today.
No problem. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, you've always been a good friend, and the product lines are, there's multiple manufacturers out there and a lot to offer. In the world of healthcare, I just think we do it better than anybody else.
There you go.
I think we have more to offer. This is all we do, by the way. We don't specialize in anything else. So we get up.
So you don't do any tools?
We don't.
No,
We don't do tools or Post-it notes or anything. Did I get them all in there? So anyway, just jabbing fun. But those other competitors are formidable opponents. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
They do a great job.
They have the great intent, which
They
is
do a
life
great
safety.
job too.
Right.
You know, there's enough of it out there for all of us. But I think that our ownership has always, taught us that really integrity is what it's about.
Definitely.
And it's not about the sale, it's about doing the right thing. So we've always tried to come up with ways to try to help the industry, be better, at this. So again, I appreciate it.
No problem. And lastly, you said they can reach you through LinkedIn, and pretty much that's your...
Yep. So obviously kmason at stifirestop.com.
Okay.
If anybody has a question for me from this or anything else that they're working on, you can reach me there, and I'd be glad to get back with you. And then, for the webinar, you could reach out to me there if you want. Our website is stifirestop.com.
Okay.
You can go onto our website and see what we have coming up as well. There's a lot of great information on that website as well. And then, if you want to friend us on LinkedIn at STI Firestop, there's specified technologies actually for LinkedIn.
Okay.
There's a lot of good things coming out.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.